Good morning. This is Gail Eberharder Rankin. I'm a functional medicine physician in McCall, Idaho, and have practiced both primary care and functional medicine for many years. This is a re-recording of a talk on mitochondria that I will be posting on my website, fimmccall.com, for free. So I hope it's of interest to you. Thank you. Okay, so today we are going on a journey into our cells. We're always talking about inflammation and how it can cause so many different kinds of problems. Today, we're going to be looking at one of the major mechanisms of inflammation on a cell level. Mitochondria. What is a mitochondria? It's an ancient organism that millions of years ago were separate than us. They became symbiotic with us and engulfed by our cells. Scientists have studied the DNA of the mitochondria and realized they're not the same as our DNA. We have different genomes from the mitochondria, and everyone's mitochondria are passed to them along the maternal line or from their mother, is another interesting fact about mitochondria. What do they do? Well, to start with, they look kind of funny. They're a specialized folding of membranes within the cell where a lot of biochemistry is happening within those membranes. We know that the mitochondria produce cellular energy, or ATP. We know that they detoxify the byproducts of stress called reactive oxygen species. We know that mitochondria are critical for insulin selection by the pancreas and reception of insulin by the cell. They support the endoplasmic reticulum lining of blood vessels. For many years, mitochondria were thought only to produce energy, and now we know there are many critical functions. One of the newest functions that I see in the literature is that mitochondria make up most of the hippocampus, which is the part of our brain to do with memory. So we'll be talking about their connection to dementia prevention also. What harms the mitochondria? So this is a list of things we're exposed to every day. Carbohydrates, especially fruit sugar, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, many different medications, herbicides and pesticides, especially Roundup or glyphosate, sulfites in red wine and cyanide in tobacco, the bacterial cell walls made up of lipopolysaccharides, which have inflammatory messages to us, and our total viral load, the acute and chronic viruses in the herpes family, human papillomavirus, mononucleosis, CMV, and others. There are also some new information and articles out that some of these chronic viruses may impair certain functions more than we had suspected. CMV is currently, cytomegalovirus is currently implicated in why some young people are dying from COVID. So next, we'll be talking about mitochondria and inflammation. And some of the examples of inflammation here on the left is the villi in the gut with a yeast infection or yeast dysbiosis. So candida overgrowth can cause inflammation. In the upper right, we see a person with lupus, an autoimmune disease with inflammation in the skin. And in the lower right, we see gout or inflammation in the large toe joint, which can be very painful and chronic also. Inflammation and chronic illness. This statement is really important because Western medicine kind of acts like inflammation starts for no particular reason and that we just need to suppress it or get rid of it. But inflammation does not just exist in a vacuum. It's caused by immune imbalance and dysfunction with many possible causes. We need to find those causes and triggers and correct them in order to keep the body from bearing the chronic, constant burden of this inflammation. Mitochondrial dysfunction, when they're not working properly, increases inflammation, and immune imbalance in the mitochondria are harmed further. So we see a vicious cycle continuing. This is a slide about mitochondrial dysfunction in autoimmunity. We see the little mitochondria here with the folded membranes on the inside and a summary of what happens with mitochondria when they cannot get rid of stress and toxin byproducts and inflammation is triggered. So we see on the upper left that nutritional deficiencies are one of those things where the mitochondria cannot function properly. Carbohydrate, fructose excess, as we just mentioned, microbes and dysbiosis, xenobiotics such as herbicides and pesticides, and oxidative stress from other causes. All of those things keep the mitochondria from working properly. So not only are they not making energy properly, the detoxification function is impaired as well. The next concept I wanted to share is called apoptosis versus necrosis. So apoptosis is a normal cell death from aging of the cell. This is what should be happening when our body is functioning normally. And we see this process on the drawing of the right side here, where the cell just basically inverts, it gets smaller, it kind of falls apart, and then the body is able to scoop up those pieces normally. It has a normal mechanism for that. And that's just a normal cell aging and death. On the left, we see if there's a lot of stress to the mitochondria, that apoptosis can't happen. And the cell just starts swelling and it just kind of can't go through that process of dying properly, and it just becomes necrotic and disintegrates, and we're left with kind of a cellular explosion where we've got all these bits of cells around that the body finds very inflammatory and has a lot of trouble cleaning up. So all those things that we just heard about that really stress the cells, those just lead to this explosion and even more inflammation instead of the healthy option of apoptosis. And this is just summarizing those thoughts. So we've got kind of the same list of bad guys happening here. And I'm introducing one at the end that I'm going to focus on a little bit more, lack of exercise. So the concept of culling the herd to reduce inflammation is what happens in exercise. So exercise leads to the cells properly dying, or apoptosis, and the mitochondria being able to turn over healthy cells and no inflammation resulting. So exercise is one of our best tools to allow the apoptosis to happen and avoid inflammation. When we have less of the normal processes, decreased apoptosis, there is a clear association with cancer, with autoimmune disease, and with viral infections. And we also just heard that those are all things that prolong and keep the cycle of inflammation going. So cancer, autoimmune disease, and viral infections are all ways to know if the mitochondria are really stressed and unhealthy. And I like to remind people that skin cancer is indeed cancer. A lot of people will forget to tell us if they've had a basal cell cancer. They really don't kind of see this as a very serious kind of cancer, but it is a very clear message to us. So mitochondria and illness, I'd like to look at some categories of chronic illness and see what the research has shown us about what is happening to cause those and how the mitochondria are damaged differently in different illnesses. So in diabetes or insulin resistance, we see mitochondrial damage from gut dysbiosis, from toxins, and these are major causative problems for our whole system. Gut dysbiosis includes bacteria, yeast, and parasites. Toxins include everything from chlorinated water to plastics and carcinogens in your personal care products. I strongly recommend that people use a website called the Environmental Working Group website to see which products are thought to be clean and safe from toxins. I'm talking everything from shampoo to toothpaste. Another condition that is associated with mitochondrial damage is high blood pressure or hypertension. And here, the mitochondrial damage appears to be from toxins and from stress, or as we earlier mentioned, reactive oxygen species causing the blood vessels to tighten up and raise the blood pressure. Stress can include everything from overexercise, toxic relationships, too little or poor quality sleep, and food allergens. So it can mean you have to really go looking for what the stress is and do some focus testing, really pay attention to even small symptoms that you think, oh, maybe that's probably nothing, but it could be a major clue. The next category of mitochondrial related problems is Alzheimer's dementia. Here we can see mitochondrial damage from exposure to the herpes simplex virus, and again, to our friend toxins. There are many research articles telling us that herpes simplex virus has a major link to dementia. And we also know that the hippocampus, the part of the brain that really is responsible for memories, is very much damaged. It's mostly full of mitochondria and is seriously damaged when the herpes simplex virus is active, and certainly when dementia happens. So this is indicative of the same type of immune balance that causes inflammation. This is a research article showing that chronic low-grade viruses are a significant factor in dementia and mitochondrial health. So this is really not brand new information. This is from 2014. We've also connected the human papillomavirus to throat cancer. It's really critical to support your immune system and keep these chronic viruses from getting a hold or being able to be active. And that's where your immune system in your gut becomes so critical. Further into the neurologic type of problem, we can see both Parkinson's and MS associated with mitochondrial damage from toxins, we think, or xenobiotics. And here we have Muhammad Ali, who was very famous for traumatic brain injury, another type of neurologic problem, and Michael J. Fox, who's been kind of a poster person for Parkinson's and helping us understand how devastating that illness can be. A xenobiotic is any foreign chemical that doesn't belong in our cells. So that can include plastics, pesticides, even medication residue in our water. So these are areas where we can also relate mitochondria to the neurologic system. This is an article from 2014 also about glyphosate or Roundup. And this is perhaps the biggest toxin of all that we are all exposed to on a daily basis. Testing of the whole pesticide, its entire effects, reveal a much greater level of toxicity than testing of the individual components, which is what they did when they got glyphosate licensed. And I just kind of put this slide in here to remind us that between 1930 and 1953, physicians advertised cigarettes. So the American Medical Association has not been at the forefront of public health or support for our inner organs. And the statements that glyphosate is safe should not be very reassuring. So a lot of people know to avoid glyphosate by eating organic foods. The other problem here is there's danger even if you do eat organic foods. And the water and the air are contaminated with glyphosate from Roundup, according to consistent research and publicly available information. And again, this is not new information. This is from 2014. Depending on where you live, you're exposed to very significant levels of this toxin, even if you eat organic food. So the bottom line is we all have toxins on board. Migraine headache is an area where we see an overlap of genetic issues with toxins. Mitochondrial damage is clearly related to specific genes, and it is worse when certain toxins are present. The genetic problem is with the mitochondria themselves, and so it makes sense that toxins impairing mitochondria further could make a person more susceptible to migraine headaches if their genetics already cause that. We may not be able to eliminate the genetic issue, but decreasing toxins and helping the mitochondria in other ways can be of great help to those with migraines. There is a potent form of alpha lipoic acid that is a very important mitochondrial nutrient, and I have found that to be clinically more helpful in decreasing migraine headache than CoQ10. Although those are the two main nutrients that we can give to support the mitochondria. Other conditions associated with mitochondrial problems are fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And here we see mitochondrial damage from very specifically from small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or dysbiosis. This can happen in patients who have poor stomach acid production. It can happen in patients who have yeast or bad bacteria in the colon, often associated with mold toxins that impair the immune function. So when we have overgrowth of yeast or bad bacteria or parasites in the colon and not enough stomach acid to acidify the GI tract, those bacteria can sneak back up into the small intestine and cause a lot of inflammation and this type of pain and chronic fatigue symptom. So, yes, I like the idea of saving the whales, and I really want to save the mitochondria. What can we do? So we know we can delete the weak mitochondria, which avoids that inflammatory necrosis with exercise and carbohydrate restriction. We can support the good mitochondria with nutrition, supplements, exercise, and again, carbohydrate restriction. We can unblock obstacles to mitochondrial function by eliminating toxins, those going in and removing those that we already have, and by eliminating infections. Many people will need the expert help of a naturopathic or functional medicine practitioner to find all the links and clues that will help these things happen. It can take time also to make these changes and use the detailed testing that tells us the best approach for each person. Sometimes we can really only tackle one issue at a time, and an expert can help us figure out which layer is most accessible and what to do first. So in more detail about the exercise piece and the carbohydrate restriction, with exercise, the current evidence is telling us short bursts or intervals are really helpful if you're able to do that without injury. And it's the type of combinations that can be really helpful are resistance training, aerobic, and longer or more sustained exercise. Keys are to go slowly, start slowly, get yourself checked out by a physical therapist or your physician to make sure it's safe for you to try things, and then go really slowly and gently so you don't get injured. With more detail on the carbohydrate restriction, you want to reduce your fruit intake and dense carbohydrates. Really don't want to be eating anything with refined sugar in it. And you want to emphasize veggies, lean protein, nuts, seeds, and berries. You can think about the Mediterranean diet or a whole foods diet where we're just not eating any foods that came in a box. And we use a lot of individualized testing in both these areas to determine the best starting place and route for each person. In terms of supporting or maintaining the mitochondria, we've talked about exercise and carb restriction. The mitochondria are also helped by healthy fats, such as coconut oil, vitamin E, fish oil, or choline in eggs. Protein and fat are major components that make up the mitochondria as well, and we need those in our diet, of course. I mentioned the alpha lipoic acid. Acetylcarnitine is also an enzyme that is in the mitochondria that helps generate energy. CoQ10 is one of its workhorses. And the hormones of DHEA from adrenals and melatonin for sleep should also be checked into. We do have an additional website just on thyroid and adrenal function on the website at fimmccall.com. So to unblock the mitochondria and power them up, to help on the toxin front, avoid toxins such as smoking, alcohol, heavy metals, plastics, pesticides. Remove toxins with sweating, sauna, active detox, and restore the immune system to decrease the viral load with high quality sleep, decreasing stress, herbal support, vitamin D. I often tell people the top 10 things you should do are stop smoking. You can also think about not storing food in plastic containers. Don't drink hot liquids out of plastic cups. Don't use pesticides anywhere. Avoid excessive alcohol or consider no alcohol for a period of time, and don't live next to a coal-fired power plant, but maybe that's going away. Again, individual testing is critical. So In sailor's lingo, wishing you fair winds and following seas on your journey to health. And hopefully this information about mitochondria will be helpful. Thank you. Thank you.